What's up? Welcome to this presentation by yours truly, the one and only, never phony, the original, not crispy. No, you can't diss me. Ron Wilkie, your cybersecurity quarterback. So this presentation is all about the top 10 network vulnerabilities. I'm not necessarily talking about software vulnerabilities this time or physical vulnerabilities, but strictly your network. There will be some crossover, right? But that's what this is all about. So let's go. First, introduction to network security. Do you even know what that is? Basically, it's all about how your data communicates from one location to another, right? It's transmitted, it goes through firewalls, servers, things of that nature. And so network security is securing those assets that perform those functions. That's an easy way to say it. But what I have here on the screen is it involves implementing measures to prevent unauthorized access, use, disclosure, disruption, modification, or destruction of network resources. And now you're going to hear me say a lot of things about confidentiality, integrity, availability over the course of all of these different videos that I'm making. But in general, these are the things that we want to protect, especially access to different assets, your people, processes, and technology that's on the network. All right, let's keep it moving. So what are some common network attack vectors, right? So some of these things will cross over into other videos, but like malware, you see it right here: virus, worms, Trojan horses that exploit vulnerabilities to gain access to systems. So some of these don't start off as a network vulnerability. It may be a vulnerability somewhere else, but it ends up happening and working on your attacking your network. That's what I was trying to say. It ends up attacking your network, just like phishing. You can see phishing right here. What happens with phishing is somebody clicks an email they shouldn't. And next thing you know, that perpetrator has access to the entire network or to different portions of that network, and then they can escalate the privileges depending on what system they're on and the vulnerabilities. So some of these things tie in one to another. Denial of service. Denial of service attacks. You've heard me talk about this previously, where pretend you're like at a house and a pizza is being delivered. Now somebody calls and delivers a billion pizzas. Now you can't get into that house because there's so much information, so many pizzas at that port, at that door that's open. So now the actual pizza that you actually ordered does not come in because there's so much. That's kind of like denial of service. There's so much data, so much traffic that's flooding the system, flooding the network, that now other types of information, real good information, good data, is not going through your network. It's not coming through the ports it's supposed to, because now you have a denial of service. And what I'm really talking about is distributed denial of service. But a denial of service is basically when you see that 404 error. Sometimes when you go to a website, that could be a denial of service. Now you can't get to that service for whatever reason. But I just described the distributed DOS. Social engineering. Someone can just social engineer their way in, plug up something into the network from an internal spot. Let's say you have Ethernet ports, and I plug my Raspberry Pi in, and it disables the network because I have a package running on it. So anyway, these are different common attack vectors. I spent way too much time explaining that and going through that because I'm trying to make you a quick, easy video. That's what I do. Try not to make these long, drawn out videos. There's a time and place for that. But right now, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to give you a quick overview of these things. Unpatched software vulnerabilities. So when software is not patched, right, it opens up vulnerabilities into your network. So like I said earlier, this may not be like a top 10 OOPS, top 10 software vulnerability, application vulnerability type thing. But unpatched software, which has some similarity to some of those, can cause network attacks to take place. All right, so here you can say outdated software. What you need to do is also have vulnerability scanning. So that's one of the things that you can do. We're going to talk about mitigation later. And then have security updates. Make sure your security is updated, your patches, your laptops, your devices, the software, they're all updated because they can cause network attacks. This is how people attack the network. All right, another way they attack the network: weak passwords and credentials that are not up to date with certain security standards. So use strong password, complex unique passwords. You can use password managers like LastPass and 1Password. You can use those, and definitely, I always say use two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, right? Either you are something You know something or you have something. So DNA or your fingerprint is something that you are. A password, something that you know, and something that you have could be a key card, right? Or an RFD ID. So those are two-factor authentications. Two out of the three is multi-factor authentication. You got to have that. Nowadays, you have to have that. Many times you'll get a call on your phone or a text on your phone to validate that's something that you have. And you put in your password, that's something you know. Then you get a text, something you have, and you put that information in. That's multi-factor authentication. I approve 100% of everything should have multi-factor authentication. These are things that allow intruders into your network. Misconfigured firewall and networks devices. Your firewall should be locked down with the proper configuration. You should have your firewall rule sets reviewed every 6 months. Or whenever there's any change, you need to update them and check those items. Right? Always use best practices for your devices. So depending on what type of device, if you're using Cisco routers or whatever it is you're using, your load balancers, F5 load balance, whatever you're using, you need to make sure they are configured correctly and to industry standards. And you should audit those things as well to make sure of a third-party auditor to come in and make sure that your configurations are set well and that you review them at least every 6 months where there's a change that takes place in your environment, especially even with key personnel. Key personnel leaves, you need to make sure and you check the systems to make sure they are still up to date and running as they should, and credentials are taken away. Also, lack of segmentation. So, what is segmentation? That's when you have a certain environment over here. Maybe you have all your HR stuff over here. Maybe you have all your credit card data over here. Maybe you have your application development over here. So you want to segment those things and have different rule sets and firewall rule sets of how an access control is and how to get to all those things, defense and depth. So you want to segment. You don't want them all together. You want them segmented apart so you can do different security controls on each one of those, right? So part of it is the people, process, technology. You need to know what your assets are and what's on those assets, so then you can do the proper controls on those assets. Set up the proper firewall rule sets on those assets, right? The technology has to be protected according to the data that's on there as well. You also want to protect it, even though it may not have a lot of sensitive data. If you isolate your networks into the proper locations with the proper security, if someone takes advantage of a server, it may not have sensitive data, but they may try and use that to escalate their privileges to another location. They won't be able to do that. So you want to reduce the attack surface as well. And that's one thing that segmentation can do also. It makes your footprint a lot smaller, especially for your sensitive data. If you don't have all of your devices all together in one big mesh network, but you isolate, okay? Remember that. So this is what happens. Insider threat and privilege misuse. You definitely always need security awareness training for your employees. Educate your employees. That's the first line of defense. It's not the firewalls, it's not your password, it's the employee. There's so many ways to get in. It's usually through the employee. It's usually the easiest way and the way that's tried most often. Access control, implement the access control privileges, right? Role-based privileges. So if you work in HR, you should not have access to credit card data, right? If you're a developer, you shouldn't have access to the HR Oracle, background check system or whatever they're using. If you're working as in cybersecurity, using cybersecurity tools, you may have access to a lot of these things, but you may not have access to payroll, right? If you're the CEO, you may have a lot of information based on budgets and things like that, but that does not mean that you have access to the payment card devices. Okay, so you have to make sure that the access that's given to the employee is the right access based on their role. And also monitoring and auditing, right? You want to continuously check these things at least annually. But whenever there is a major change in your network, in your people, or your process or technology, the PPTs, if there is any type of update to those things, you want to audit and make sure everything is still working as it should. Now, real-time monitoring, that is used by the SOC, Security Operations Center, in real time to make sure there are no type of anomalies happening at the time it's being monitored, at any point of the day, 24/7. That's something that takes place 24/7. Also, that takes place is logging, right? You want to make sure that you are logging and recording the information of when people are coming in or accessing something and when they're not, and where they're located, things of that nature. And this is all utilizing a SIM system to centralize and correlate security data. That's your SOC, your Security Operations Center. You have to have that if you plan on stopping any type of abuse or any type of issues quickly. So if your system is now attacked by ransomware, you want to be able to stop it in its tracks, isolate that system, clean it up because you're going to have a business continuity plan, you're going to have a disaster recovery plan. And this usually is involved in your incident response plan. And depending on what or who you're working with in the terminology, you have three different plans, two different plans, or it could all be one plan. All right. And this is it. This is your best practice for network security. I'll go back over this again. Security awareness, regular updates, strong passwords, network segmentation. All right. So I appreciate you watching this video. Have any questions? I'm Ron Wilkie. You can find me online. Just type in Ron Wilkie, Google me, and you can get me. You can email me if you have any questions. I'm sure you can probably find my number because I'm called a lot. You need any help with any of this, let me know. I love this stuff. All right. You all have a good day. And again, hit me up if you have any questions.